so I can capture it. All right, so the first framework for learning is the professional learning community. You've probably heard of a professional learning community before, but it's defined as an assigned group that meets for explicit outcomes, and I think the explicit outcomes is the important piece. They have a designed purpose, and one of the things that I really stood out to me is using the student data to inform the group's professional learning. So you look at the data throughout a school year, and then you use that to collaborate and decide what the group needs to learn about. And you look at that data for both deciding interventions for students, but also kind of interventions for teachers, which teachers' data is lower and which teachers' data is higher, so that the higher teachers can help the teachers that are learning.
Now, is that based on research you've done?
That was
or
based
on the
So that was based
given?
on one anecdotal story about a school who uses a professional learning community, and it was one of the things that I really picked up on.
Interesting.
So the questions for professional learning community is, what should we intentionally learn in order to become more effective in our teaching so that students learn? But the story was about a high school where the teachers developed teams to determine the skills and knowledge that was needed for each unit of study, and then decide formative assessments. Based on the formative assessments, they provided interventions.
Right.
And then based on the formative assessments, they saw which teachers were successful with teaching that skill and which teachers needed help. And then the teachers that were successful gave their resources and their knowledge, even observe that teacher. They could go and observe this teacher who was having success, so that they can then inform their own practice. So I thought that was an interesting way that school in particular used professional learning communities.
That sounds like, if you look at our collaboration questions.
Yes.
That sounds like a framework.
Yes. When a lot of the questions that were coming up with a professional learning community really reminded us of the questions that we've generated for our collaboration.
I really like that quote.
Yeah.
That's a good quote.
And then there was a couple other questions that'll come up later about professional learning community. So this was kind of the process from that high school. Teachers collaborate on instruction, then they do a formative assessment, interventions for both students and teachers. They kind of look at student data by standard and by student. Every 3 weeks that school is doing that.
Within a grade level team?
Yeah, within their
setting?
team.
Who's present during that?
I think it was just the team.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was just the team doing that every 3 weeks, and based on what skills they were teaching. And it was a high school, so I think all the literacy teachers were meeting, and then all the math teachers for units of study. Yeah. And then the teachers apply the new learning in order to have student success. Then just some components of the PLC. Clear set of expectations, uses the collective talents of the group. So in that story, the teachers looked at teachers who had stronger capabilities as a reference to help other teachers have success as well. Focused on the results, and then there's just norms of respect, listening for self-awareness, and you can read the rest of that list. Then some of the activities a PLC does is defining outcomes, and then the indicators for that outcome. How are you going to know that the students have learned that? Looking at the results to drive both interventions for the teacher and the student, and then defining the best practices that are working based on data.
Okay.
The next slide.
I do have a question. And
you're allowed to ask
in
questions.
your reading, but when you talked about uses collective talent